Welcome everyone to this Charlotte Readers Live event. It's April 27th, I think the year's 2022 still, and we are here in a non-audio format, audio too, of course, but we've got video here, and I'm joined tonight by several talented people. I'm first of all, for those of you listening, I'm Landis Wade, host of Charlotte Readers Podcast, also an author, and I'm here tonight with Donna Everhart, author of The Saints of Swallow Hill and many other books. Raise your hand, Donna, there, okay. And also Amy Bentley, she's a narrator of the audiobook for The Saints of Swallow Hill and many other audiobooks. Amy, there you go, raise your hand, there you go. And finally, Bill A. Jones, narrator of the audiobook for my novel, Daily Declarations, and many other audiobooks. We're gonna have more introduction in a minute, but Bill, raise your hand, say hello there. Yeah, all right. Hey, so viewers, tonight we are going to have a lot of fun. We're going to be talking authors, narrators, and audiobooks. And together, the four of us are going to talk about, we're going to use these two novels, Donna's recent novel, The Saints of Swallow Hill, and my recent novel, Deadly Decorations, narrated by these very talented narrators here. And we're going to use those to talk about, the making of audiobooks and also a little bit more about the reading and writing process. But first, let's do some introductions. Donna Everhart, I'll say some things she might not say about herself here. Okay, so I'll do this. She's a USA Today bestselling author of Southern fiction with authenticity and grit, including Saints of Swallow Hill, the Indie Next List selection, The Education of Dixie Dupree, The Forgiving Kind, The Moonshiner's Daughter, and the Southeastern Library Association award-winning novel, The Road to Bittersweet. She was born and raised in Raleigh, North Carolina. She stayed close to her hometown, she says, for much of her life. She lives in Dunn, about an hour away, I think. Donna, tell us, the things that I left out, a little bit about yourself and why you enjoy writing.
Well, hello, everyone. Donna Everhart here. I was going to say that most everybody would probably figure out that I write Southern fiction because of the way I talk, just a little twang there. But Landis, you covered it really well. But I actually started my career in IT, and people have always found that kind of strange because I did that for about 35 years. And then I discovered Southern fiction through Kay Gibbons. And Kay Gibbons has written many wonderful novels. And once I realized there are actually novels out there where people talk like I do and have a family like I do and do the things that I do, eat the things that I do. That was really kind of the impetus for me to get started. And that all took place in actually Dixie Dupree, the first book, was something that I started back in the early 90s, believe it or not. But eventually I acquired an agent and eventually the book sold. And so now I'm just trying to crank them out as quick as I can.
That's great. We're gonna talk about. I'm going to introduce Amy next. Amy Bentley. Maybe find out how someone from Connecticut can talk like you, Donna, when she does the narration of your books. But Amy is a professional stage, a screen and voice actress, proud member of a lot of acronyms that I can't pronounce here. But she's narrated over 200 audiobooks and is recipient of the Audiophile Earphones Award for her telling of the Education of Dixie Dupree by Donna Everhart. New York credits are very lengthy as well. She's an actress, and you can find her at amymelissabentley.com. And of course, Donna Everhart is at donnaeverhart.com. But so, Amy, I guess since you told me you're from Connecticut, first question is, how did you do the voices of Ray Lynn and Dell?
Well, I hope I did an okay job speaking to some Southern people. I've always just picked up accents quickly. They fascinate me. A special place in my heart for Southern accents. So it was easy. And plus Donna writes so beautifully. It was just, it just flows right out.
And before we go further, just tell us a little bit about how you got into narrating audiobooks and why you love it.
Sure. I was living in Manhattan, doing the everyday, and I came home for some family things. And then I met someone doing Shakespeare, and she was like, hey, you should try this out. And I started narrating for Tantor Audio. And that was in 2015. I just looked it up because I couldn't believe. And I've just been doing it ever since.
That's great. All right. Third introduction here, Bill A. Jones, Bill, best known as an actor for his humorous role as news anchor Rod Remington on Fox TV's Glee. He's also appeared on Comedy Central's Workaholics, The King of Queens, CSI New York, Everybody Hates Chris, General Hospital. He's done a lot of those.
Can't keep a job.
Yeah, Days of Our Lives, many other shows, voiceover work for such clients as the Disney Channel, Warner Brothers, and the Fox Movie Channel, and has done radio work for years and audiobook work too, and was named one of LA's best concert cabaret artists. Bill and I connected through the ACX platform when I was looking for an audiobook narrator. I think about 96 people auditioned, and I found him, and I was so happy to find him. Bill, tell us what I left out and why you like narrating audiobooks.
Well, you said it all, Landis. I have absolutely nothing to add to that. I do enjoy narrating audiobooks because I've always been at heart, many times, I think that I'm a storyteller. That's why I've always liked, for voiceover, I like narration stuff. I like documentary type stuff. But I feel like I'm a storyteller. And if I have an opportunity to tell a good story and use some of the other skills that I have, it's the best of all worlds. So, and I get to do it in my own time in my own studio at home. So, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, and you get to put on a lot of hats behind you there too.
Yeah, it's ironic. I actually have 2 hat racks. I don't know where I put the other one. Actually, I think anyway, we're doing some construction around the house and things are a little topsy-turvy, but that's sort of a metaphorical thing for me because I wear a lot of hats. I do a lot of different things. I used to do stage work, but I sort of gave it up several years ago because the time demands for it. And pretty much I've concentrated on the voiceover stuff. I used to do radio, as you mentioned. I was heard on a network all over the country every weekend. And then, of course, the most important thing for me, in many ways, has been the on-camera work, and that's been a wonderful blessing. But again, I do a lot of different things because when one thing is quiet, the other one hopefully picks up and sort of fills in the mortar between the bricks. So, so I wear a lot of hats.
Well, that's great. Well, before we jump into talking about audiobooks, how the sausage is made and that process, which I'm going to be interested to ask a bunch of questions about, it would help, I think, our viewers probably to learn a little bit about the novels that were narrated. And so, Don, I want to start with you to tell us a little bit about the 2 main characters for your book, the setting, and maybe a little bit about the challenges they face. And by the way, I really enjoyed the book, Don. It was great. I loved learning about the turpentine industry in the South. I'm from the Tar Heel State, but I never knew that was because of the gum that came out of the trees and that stuck our heels to the ground. But I think I've given a little hint of the setting, but go ahead and pick it up from there.
Oh, no, that's perfect. That's actually perfect because, like you, born and raised here in the Tar Heel State, and I consider the Saints of Swallow Hill the origin story for where the term Tar Heel came from, because a lot of people think that it was derived from the Civil War, because there's the saying, they stuck in battle like they had tar on their heels, and that's just not the case. Originally, North Carolina was known for naval stores, and a lot of people don't know that term. And that's simply the extraction of pine gum from the pine trees, distilled into tar, pitch, and turpentine used to waterproof the old tall wooden sail ships. So we were a top producer, and that's where the term Tar Heel came from. It was considered derogatory at one point in time. But the book itself, I knew I wanted to write in the Depression era, and I'm going to just hold the book up here so everybody can see it. So this is The Saints of Swallow Hill. It's an absolutely beautiful cover. I fell in love with it the moment that I saw it, because to me, it's just very evocative, and it just sort of screams Southern summer night. And it also screams mosquitoes in a way, because that's exactly what they suffered through at these labor camps. So like Landis has sort of alluded to, this book is set in a turpentine labor camp. And so this begs the question, how did my characters get there? And so the story is told from the perspective of Delwood Reese and Raylan Cobb. And these individuals, I had to figure out a way that I needed something very, very definitive that would make them, compel them to work in an environment like this, because it was absolutely brutal. I did a lot of research on this story, and everything that you read in there that can happen to these people, the way the work is done, is all historically accurate. The only thing that is fiction is, of course, the narrative surrounding them. But these two individuals each experience what I would call a life-altering event that sends them down into this turpentine camp. So it's basically out of necessity that they end up there. And I don't want to, of course, spoil the book, but Delwood Reese is who we start off with. The narrative flips back and forth between Delwood Reese and Raylan Cobb. And within the first 3 chapters of each of those individuals, all the way through chapter 6, you as a reader will completely understand exactly why they are in this turpentine labor camp. And it's through their own volition, but these are tough decisions that they had to make. And they had then, once they were there, they basically had to do everything they could to survive it.
Yeah, that's great. And another interesting thing about it is that Raylan Cobb, her inciting incident, the event that sends her further south to the turpentine camp, causes her to then pretend to be a man in the camp. And that's interesting to me from a audiobook narration standpoint, because Amy, did her voice have to change a little bit when you got to trying to make her out to be a man?
A little bit, but not too much, or else it
Right.
sounds crazy.
Right.
But a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So tell us, Amy, as a narrator, what you enjoyed about Saints of Swallow Hill.
You know, every time I get one of Donna's books, I know I'm in trouble, because I'm going to sit down and I'm going to read that book in one day, because I can't stop turning the page. And it's like Donna said, you know, when the characters go through what they go through, you feel every ounce of it. And as an actor, that is such a blessing, because sometimes you got to fill in the gaps, you know, but the way she writes is so descriptive. You feel like you are them. And that's great as a narrator to experience.
That's great. All right, well, let's set the stage a little bit here with my novel, Deadly Declarations. Also, we've got history. It's a little further back than the turpentine camps. It's a contemporary mystery, but ties back to the colonial period 250 years ago, 1775, in the little town that George Washington called a trifling place. It was Charlotte in the big county of Mecklenburg, which consumed a lot of other counties around us at the time. It was in that year in 1775 that Colonel Thomas Polk called a meeting of all the county militia. They came together, and because of what had happened in Lexington and Concord, they, by God Almighty, declared their independence from the greatest nation in the world, and therein was born the Mech Deck, or so they say. And so there's a little bit of a dispute there about whether the Mech Deck is real or not real, and you know, if it existed because of the language is similar, and that and the Declaration of Independence, who copied from whom, if you want to believe about that. But I set this novel in a retirement community because I wanted to explore the you know, what happens when you turn 65 and there's a career transition and you're with all these different characters. And one of the characters was a reluctant hero by the name of Craig Travail, a lawyer who was about that same age as me, who got kicked out of his law firm early in the book. I did not tackle my managing partner on my way out like he did. But,
You darn it. You see, you took my question.
Yeah, I know. There you go. Craig Travail, he tackles him on the way out. He ends up there. He thinks his life is over. He don't want to make friends because he says, why make friends with these folks? They're just here to die. They're not here to live. They're just looking for their next meal. They don't really care about life. And he has to learn over the course of the book that there are really some energetic people in there, a lot of talent in there, a lot of life has been learned by these folks. And who better to solve a mystery than some energetic retirees? So it's a mystery. A man dies early in the book. He leaves a handwritten will and gives his $50 million fortune to the most despised resident at the Independence Retirement Community, Sue Ellen Parker. And he also, when they find his body, his manuscript on the Mech Deck is missing. So there you go. They got to solve these mysteries and find out what that's all about. And the reluctant hero is dragged along by none other than Jaeger Alexander and Harriet Keaton. So I'll flip it to Bill. And maybe Bill, what do you think of Jaeger Alexander? And did you have fun? Did you have fun doing this book?
I had fun doing this book. This is the fourth book I've done of yours, and all of your books have a great sense of storytelling. Again, I'm going back to that storyteller thing, and they take you on a great journey, and they keep your interest. They don't linger too long in one place. Sometimes that happens with certain authors. You sort of are waiting to get to the next event. But the thing for me that is most fun is the characters, and I've got a little excerpt a little bit later we'll do with a couple of the characters that I enjoyed fleshing out, and all of the characters are quite fun. The central character, Mr. Travail, I've sort of made him the everyman, and he's pretty much my voice, sort of right down the middle, so that all of the people around him can orbit and be very interesting. I'll just put it that way. And so, yeah, I love your characters. The characters you've written are just very, very compelling to me.
Well, thank you. I keep telling people I'm going to write a series, and the good thing is the people are going to always be moving into the independence retirement community. I can bring in any talent I want, and I can make them into whatever I want. But some of the characters, like NASCAR Nellie, who drives her motorized wheelchair a bit too fast and runs over the old ladies who don't really get out of the way. And then there's the Godfather. Is he really living in witness protection or not? And but one of the favorites for me is the Carrie Roberts, which is actually the name of my aunt who died, but she was kind of talkative too. She's referred to as the gossip queen because in court, when they try to keep out her hearsay testimony, she turns to the judge and says, just very matter of factly, well, Judge, look, if I didn't hear it, it didn't happen. so there you go. One way to overcome the hearsay objection. All right. So, and I love, Donna, the characters in your book as well. Yours was a real journey. You took us south, and then you took us there through these different points of view. And of course, you've got an evildoer in your book. Crow is a pretty
Yeah.
evildoer. And every book's got to have a strong evildoer character, so that the main characters have something to try to overcome. But anyway, we've got a great setup there. Let's start talking about audiobooks and the audiobook process. I think it's interesting, and I'll just, for the viewers here, we've got two different kinds of audiobook collections here. I produced my book Daily Declarations as an independent author. I hired all the talent that I had the editor, the copy editor, the book designer, the cover designer, worked with a small press and everything. Donna's traditionally published with her book. I connected with Bill through the ACX platform on the first three books, and the last one, we just knew each other so well. We just contacted each other. I contacted him directly, and we worked it out. But the way y'all got together and the way it's done traditionally is different. So let's hear about that first, and then we'll talk about how Bill and I did it, just to show the juxtaposition of the two ways that this can get done. Let's start with it. Amy, how did you get on to doing Donna's books?
So the way it works at that particular studio is, they send out a casting, you can audition for it. I don't remember, Donna, did I audition for your first book? Did I send a clip?
I was going to say, the way it happens on my end, what I see is from my editor comes audio rights sale, the paperwork. And that's it. It's like, woohoo, got an audio rights sale, And then in this particular instance, though, with the Saints of Swallow Hill, for the first time ever, I was asked, about the narrator. And I was like, Amy Melissa Bentley. So that's all I see, so I don't know how it happens on your end, but Tantor came to my editor and asked the question. And I mean, you've done 4 of my 5 books, and I don't know if you pay attention to reviews, but I do. We're not supposed to, but I do. And there's a lot of great comments out there about how you've narrated that book. So anyway, that's all I know is it's a piece of paper that gets sent to me, and I know that a rights sale has happened.
I didn't know that. So on my
Yeah.
end, it's just they send out, are you interested in being considered for this book? Landis, like I said before, Donna and I have never actually spoken prior to this because it all goes through the publisher. So for me, if I get selected or if, Tantor casts me, then I get the script, and then you just, you sort of do your investigation from there and sort of figure out what should be what. So it's an interesting process, but it's interesting to hear your side of things.
Well, that's going to lead to some more questions. But before I ask those questions, we'll talk a little bit about the indie route. We went when I did the Christmas books of 3, I put them up for audition all at the same time through the ACX platform, subsidiary of Amazon and Audible. And when you do that, it allows narrators to come along and do an audition, and I can listen to them. And it was very interesting because the 3 different books, had some different narrator points of view, different characters, and Bill did a great job doing it. But Bill, from your end, I guess you see that books go up on the platform, and then you have the option to either audition or not, and you do a little clip, and it just loads directly. Is that how it was for you?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it is. I'm different than Amy. Amy works a lot with Tantor Media, and I'm putting 2 and 2 together here. Tantor Media has probably a contract with Donna's publisher, and that's how that works. With ACX, basically, when I'm not that busy and I'm interested and I want to do an audiobook or whatever, and nothing has presented itself, and one of the other companies that I work with has not given me an opportunity, that's when I go on and I start browsing through and looking through what sort of looks interesting to me. And something we didn't mention earlier is that I am from the South originally. Had to work to get rid of the Southern accent, but
Why?
so that they wouldn't always cast me as the cracker from down south. Yeah. And so basically, I do look for things that sort of interest me. I like historical things. Your titles, Landis, interested me because, I was able to tie in my Southern heritage. And then also the first 3 books were about Christmas, and I'm a big lover of Christmas and the whole holiday season. And so that interested me. I also enjoy business books. Sometimes business books are very straightforward. You're not necessarily going to be popping in and out of characters and all of that stuff. So it's a little more linear in that way. But the kind of books that you find on the ACX platform and then you can decide to audition for are varied as you can possibly find. And so that's the way you and I got together.
Right.
And now
right.
So anyway, hopefully that answered the question. Yes.
Yeah. And also just to add to that, although we did the first 3 books collectively on ACX, I decided to use Find Away Voices for the next, for this 4th book, in part because we knew each other and we could do it directly, and then I can just upload them to Find Away. And Find Away, for those who are putting together their own audiobooks, has a wide distribution for audiobooks to libraries and everything else. Whereas if you go exclusive with Audible, it's just Audible, and so, and probably, Amy, your Tantor and your publisher, Donna, they're probably trying to get the books as wide as they can. So they're going to be on Audible. They're going to be everywhere else as well. But in the indie world, you kind of go, ACX tries to entice you to go with them exclusively by saying you'll get a few more percentage points of royalty. But, really, if you want to be wide, you go non-exclusive, and you can do something like Find Away Voices. But anyway, that's interesting the way you enter into this process because I was very much involved with Bill and having discussions, and that leads kind of the next question to Amy. Amy, you haven't talked to the author about the books that you've done. This is the first time y'all are actually talking in person. You've already done 4 books for her. How do you know that you are capturing the essence of what the author has in mind? Now, you did, I think, Donna would agree that you did a great job with these books, but going into it, how do you know, for example, that the author had in mind this, that, or the other, or let's start with that. Yeah.
Sure. So as far as some pronunciations and things like that go, if you can't figure it out, what we're supposed to do is, contact the producers. And then if it's something they can't figure out, they're supposed to reach out to Donna and the publisher. But as far as the tone goes and character choices, it really, for me, it's about picking apart the script and finding the little gems that the authors have hidden, and then, drawing a full picture from there. But you really don't know. You just have to go with your gut, and stay consistent, and that's it. Hope for the best.
Yeah.
I tend to write in the vernacular as well. So
Mhm.
that hopefully helps a little bit. You sort of get that sense of where I'm coming from with the speech. So
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
when you're reading that, of course, it's a little different when you get into the other part of the book. But yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, when I read the reviews, they're always very positive.
Mm.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah. So I think
Yeah.
it's done really
And
well.
I had a lot of characters in my book because I had some bit parts that were in the retirement community. And Bill got, 99% of them the way I was thinking about it. There's only like one character or something that, we had to kind of adjust a little bit. But Bill, I guess same question. I mean, you asked for a few things from me. I probably gave you more than you needed to do your work. But typically, what do you like to have, Bill, when you're narrating an audiobook?
Well, it's interesting because I've done it both ways. There is, I've done several books in which literally I've gotten the manuscript and I never hear anything. The publishers, again, if I have a problem with the pronunciation, like Amy, I'll reach out to the guys who are producing or whatever, and find out, hey, what is this and what have you. And sometimes you never hear anything. Although, and I'll throw this question out to Amy directly. Usually, on almost every book, with the exception of some educational books and what have you that I've done, for, like in the K through 12 thing, whatever, I usually do what I call a pace and tone sample. Oftentimes, it's maybe part of the first chapter or something like that. You send that off, and usually the producers will look at that and say, yeah, that pace is good, or no, you need to slow down a little bit, or yeah, make it a little friendly, whatever. Usually there's, they usually 9 times out of 10 or more, they're just fine with it. But I usually do that, and then that gives me an idea as far as pace and tone is concerned on whether or not I can go forward. And then again, I've done it both ways. With you, Landis, you gave very specific and interesting notes on the characters that helped me to dial in something that I could do with them. And part of my creativity is pulling some voice or whatever out of the hat, for my whatever. So again, both ways. So Amy, do you usually do a sample to start off on your things, or do you're off to the races?
So Bill, that's a great question. It depends on the publisher. So I work with 5 or 10 other publishers as well. Some of them require they call the first 15, which I'm sure you know.
Right.
And you send that off, and you'll get like a thumbs up, or tweak this a little bit. But that was not the case with Donna's books. I didn't have to send off a first 15, but I do find that like on ACX and Findaway, I work with them as well, and they'll ask for that sometimes too. Just depends.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's funny too, because we talk about looking up the pronunciation of words. I threw some legal words at Bill, like caveat emptor and voir dire and huzzah, and if you look up the word huzzah on the internet, where they tell you what it sounds like, you can get 2 or 3 different versions of what huzzah is supposed to sound. That's a 1775 expression of exclamation in support of whatever is being done. Declare independence, huzzah. Voir dire too. But have you found that, Amy, that sometimes even when you look it up, you get conflicting descriptions?
I have a bunch of different resources. I use Forvo, Youglish. There's a whole bunch of resources, and you just have to go with the one that's the most consistent across the board, because I do find that a lot, Landis, that it's not quite, you have to guess.
Yeah, interesting. All right, well, let's talk a little bit more about the the process, the making of the sausage here. Do you like to read the whole book through ahead of time? Do you like to record, as you go, get the feel of it, and surprise yourself as to where it's going? What do y'all prefer? Let's start with Bill this time.
It depends.
Okay, it's like a lawyer. You ask a question, it's like a lawyer answer. It depends, maybe.
It depends. I've told you I enjoy business books sometimes. I usually don't do much, if any, of a pre-read on a business book because it's pretty simple. Now, I'll back up from that statement and I'll say that, unlike a lot of narrators, I probably spend way too much time in the editing on the back end because I edit my own stuff. I know some narrators farm that out. Other narrators also farm out the quality check and all of that stuff. I do all that in my own studio, and so I tend to be ultra nitpicky in the editing process, and sometimes I'll redo something like 2 or 3 times and take a lot more time doing an audiobook than maybe a couple of my friends do. And again, everyone has got their own technique in how they do it. So that said, again, with a business book, I don't do much of a pre-read. With a book like Deadly Declarations, I needed to do some reading to find out the lay of the land. And occasionally I'll, not read every last chapter, but I'll, once I've gotten with Deadly Declarations, I think I read the first 10 chapters and then skipped ahead to certain things to sort of sample through there and look at things. And then, frankly, you did a lot of the work for me because you gave me so much character information that made it easy for me. So it depends. That's the answer.
So, Amy, from your perspective, how about you? Do you read the book through and then come back, or what do you do?
I do. I tend to read the whole book because I like to know where I'm going, so I know what my tone needs to be at certain points to sort of lead the listener to the right conclusion. But also, I've heard some horror stories where people record a whole book and they get to the last chapter and it's like, oh, someone said blah 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 in their British accent, and they haven't done the whole book. And they have to start all over again.
Absolutely.
Right. So I will not do that. I like to know where everything's going. And also that way, while I'm prepping, if I do come across a pronunciation or a name or something that I can't figure out on my own, I want to give the publisher enough time to do that research, to reach out to Donna, reach out to the author and say, what do you want for this? Because, I have anxiety. Truthfully, I just have to know what everything's going to be.
Yeah, and it might be interesting because, and Donna, as authors, we write these books and we know that there's going to be some reversals and there's going to be some surprises and things like that. And maybe knowing those things ahead of time might help, sort of how there's inflection or stuff as you go along through the process. I don't know, because there are a couple of, the twists and turns in my book. I know there are in Saints of Swallow Hill as well. So it's interesting to me. But Donna, you probably have. I've got some more questions here, but you haven't talked to Amy, until now, and she's done 4 books for you. You've probably got some questions.
Now I want to. Now it's like with my next book, I want to send her notes and send her. Listen, now this is because actually this next book is going to be based during the Civil War, and a lot of times I have the character's voice in my head, and so Amy, do not take this the wrong way.
No.
But I have that voice in my head. And then when I listen to you read it, it will take me a little bit of adjustment just to adapt. And then I'm in it. And then after that, I can't hear my voice anymore. It's like I hear your voice and for my characters, and they're wonderful. But with this next book, it's almost like I want to say, think Scarlett O'Hara, because this main character is going to talk very precisely. And now there's going to be some others that do a little bit more of the vernacular speech, but this character, think when she says something like the air is pure, the air is pure. Or
Yes.
like that.
So you've been prepped now for the next book already?
Yes, I did that on purpose.
Well, Donna, if you send that along to your publisher to give to the studio, they'll give it to me, and I would love that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, again, it's just like this piece of paper comes across and tells me, and I'm yay, and then it goes off to you, and everything works out great.
And the beauty of doing it when you contract directly is that you don't know necessarily what you can get. But when I really enjoyed listening to Bill do the voices, there was only like one, I think I said, just slow the pace down a little bit. Well, maybe it was Craig Trevail, because I wanted him to kind of.
No, it was.
Who was it? Was it Elkin? Elkin, maybe.
No. Well, yeah, I think they had me do Elkin a little differently, but oh gosh,
Elkin.
Yeager.
Yeager, that's right. Yeager.
Chuck Yeager Alexander.
Chuck Yeager
That's
Alexander.
I love that backstory on him. I love that backstory.
I was like, Chuck Yeager Alexander.
Yeah. And so, when we think about voices as a narrator, I said this at one time. I said, I think there can be a risk sometime if you try to do too much in terms of the voice, whether you're male or female. When I was auditioning, when I was listening to auditions, sometimes people would try too hard to make a female voice, out of a male, when they have a male voice trying to project it, or the other way around. And I'd just be interested in the comments of the narrators about this, because people get it when they're listening, even though there's a female narrating a male voice, that the character is male. You don't always have to give an accent or something like that. Would y'all comment on that a minute? Because start with Amy and then Bill. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also an avid audiobook listener, and I find too that as a listener, if someone goes too deep or too high pitch, playing the opposite gender, it takes me right out of it.
Right.
So you really have to work to find a nice balance, and you can do so much with just your pacing and just like dropping your pitch just a little bit. And like you said, Donna, at first the listener might be like, but if you do a good job, then they'll get used to it. Mm-hmm. I find that is true for myself as a listener as well. A little bit goes a long way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Bill, your thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Bill,
when doing someone of the opposite gender, for me, again, part of it is finding the attitude of that character, and it's a suggestion. Years ago, someone told me when I was doing voiceover for some television commercial or whatever, you don't have to do all the work because a lot of the picture does the work for you. Well, the words are doing a lot of the work for you here, so you don't have to do all of the heavy lifting. I don't have to sound like Scarlett O'Hara or whatever. I have to just suggest that sort of sound so that it goes into that place, and suddenly people get it. And then you contrast it with the other characters, and people get it. People get it. Sort of going off topic just slightly, sometimes when people have a very specific thing in their mind, you don't necessarily do an imitation of what they're talking about. This was something I learned years ago from some voice casters out here in Los Angeles, because there are various guys, they'll say, we want you to do this like Charlton Heston, whomever. You don't imitate Charlton Heston. You don't imitate James Earl Jones. You don't do that. Because you're always going to come up second. You're going to be a cheap second-rate imitation of that person. What you do is you boil down the essence of what that means. For instance, in one of the prior books, there was a marvelous character, Augustus Langhorne Stark, great name, who was one of the judges in the Christmas Courtroom trilogy. And you described him as being inspired by Robert Duvall in what was the movie?
The Judge.
And The Judge, yeah. Now, I can't do Robert Duvall. I can't. But I can take that sort of crusty, straightforward attitude that Robert Duvall has and filter it through me and come up with something that's unique and that suggests what it is that you're talking about. Just like you can suggest a female character. So anyway, I'm too long-winded. So
No, that's fine. So for those out there listening or watching, I keep fitting, we're video, not just my audio podcast now, but for those that are watching who might be interested in being a narrator, talk a little bit about the equipment that you use and this quality control process that Bill, you talked about. Amy, we'll start with you. Do you have your own studio? Do you go somewhere to record? And what are the basics that you have to get the job done?
Sure. So for the first 3 of Donna's books, I was at the studio in Old Saybrook, not my own home studio, but then COVID hit and I was sort of forced to make my own home studio, which turned out to be an amazing thing for me. So now I work pretty much exclusively out of that. So you said equipment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I gutted the only walk-in closet I have in this house and stacked everything in piles around my house. And you have to soundproof the walls. So I have like layers and layers of like acoustic blankets and foam, and it's carpeted. Every inch is, covered. And that takes care of pretty much the soundproofing. And then, you do your research. I basically looked at the studio in Tantor because that's where I was working the most at that point. And I took a picture of all of their pieces of equipment and I went home and I just bought all of that. So
Okay.
I did the work for myself, but it wasn't that hard.
What about you, Bill?
I started doing voiceover remotely many years ago, back before it was very common. And I've had the experience of taking my Sennheiser MKH 416 with me around the world, along with a laptop. And I've sent audio to producers from as far away as Amsterdam, Kuala Lumpur, and the island of Zanzibar, which that's another story in and of itself. But so I sort of got onto this early, and I actually have gone through about 3 different iterations of equipment. And during pandemic, I actually upgraded my equipment because my old laptop, or rather desktop, was getting pretty darn crusty. I couldn't find a browser that would work on it. And so I upgraded. I record in my own home studio. And one thing I have going for me is I have a rather expensive, but a rather directional microphone. And that helps to filter out some of the stuff that might come in from outside. But that said, it's good to have a quiet room. Having a truly soundproof room is very difficult. I don't know if you have this problem in Connecticut, Amy, but I'm not that far from Burbank Airport. Whenever a 737 goes directly over me, guess what? I'm going to have to stop down for a few seconds because that low frequency rumble comes through. It's very, very difficult to try to filter that out. So I used to be in a different studio behind our house in our former garage, and we had done a lot of things to not soundproof it, but make it nearly soundproof. And then, unfortunately, I got some mold in there, and I moved into a former little, I call it Snow White cottage we'd built in the back of the property. That was my wife's former office. And again, I've done things in here to make it more soundproof, but also to, there's a difference between soundproofing and acoustically treating a room. You can see that blanket behind me. Amy referred to the blankets and whatever. That helps to absorb sound, so you don't have that sort of echoey sort of sound you sometimes hear when someone's in a room with a lot of reflection.
Bookshelves help too with a lot of
exactly. And I've got these pretty little baffles up on the ceiling, and I've got these foam things over here and there and what have you. And so all of those things I've done, and I've done all of the audiobooks, getting back to the question, from home. I've never done one in a studio. I've had colleagues who have gone to studios, and actually I would prefer to do that in the studio because there's a percentage of your brain that is the engineer still while you're narrating. And I would actually prefer doing what you've done a lot of, Amy.
So before we jump to a few writing questions, I do want to this quality control check process, because I know how Bill and I did it. I'm curious, Amy, when you're doing it through the traditional publisher and you're contracted with Tantor, do you do your own quality control and make your own edits, or do you rely upon someone else to listen and help you out there?
Landis, I've been very spoiled.
Okay.
I have not had to do my own quality control. When you work with, some of the publishers I work with, you just send it off. However, I recently did a great book through Find a Way. And that was the first time that I was responsible for sending them a finished retail ready product. And I actually did hire it out to someone I know from, audiobook world. I give you so much credit, Bill. I could not listen to my own voice for that long. But yeah, I'm sure I would be a lot richer if I didn't outsource it, but that's okay. It's worth it.
Well, Bill has an interesting process. So what he does, he sends us, the audio for about he'll like a third of the book or something while he's working on the other. And I hired somebody to help me, and they listened to make sure the words that were on the page are there. I listened for things like tone, and if at some point in the book there was just a particular spot where he fell out of voice or something, which is very few times, right? But he had a little spreadsheet, and we'd put about 7 or 8 little things on there, send it back, and then he would edit and then upload the completed version. That was sort of our process. Bill, I like the way you did that. It made it easy on us, particularly if you're doing it independently.
I wanted to ask a quick question. How long does it take to do that? To go through the entire book and check?
I can give you a per hour indication. For an hour of narration, let's say that I'm narrating something, and I am in the studio for an hour, and no, I take that back. Let's say it ends up as an hour in length after editing. That's probably going to take, if I'm reading all the way through, for me, because I will stop and redo things over and over again. I don't do a different process called punch and roll, which, Amy, you may do that.
I do.
You do? Okay, yeah.
I got to stop you there. What is punch and roll?
Yeah.
Tell them, Amy.
Sure. So as you're recording, let's say I have, a script here right in front of me. If I'm going, so I press record, I read. If I fumble or make a mistake or my chair squeaks, I stop. I'll go back. I'll record over it and then continue, so there's no error. Of course, I still do pickups, like you were talking about, Landis, where you have the spreadsheet and you go back and fix anything I missed, but you end up with less editing to do, less pickups, because you're correcting sort of as you go. But having said that, so say, like you were saying, Bill, if it's the real time is like 1 hour finished, it will probably have taken me an hour and 30 or hour and 45 minutes to actually record that 1 hour. So I can't imagine having to edit that, what that would be like for you.
Yeah. I'm insane. My friends tell me that I really am crazy the way I do it, because as I narrate, if I read something and I make the thumper, I won't go back. I don't do the punch and roll. Instead, I just give a little pause, and then I redo the part. And then later, as I'm doing the playback and listening and editing everything together, that's where I will clean up and fix and dink with stuff and spend way too much time on all of this stuff than what I should. And the ratio is about 3.5 to 1 for an hour of narration, which boils down to, say, maybe 50 minutes or 55 minutes, whatever it is. That will be about 3.5 hours on top of that I take time with. And it's just because I am insane. I'm such a nitpicker, and I really should charge a lot more money.
Which is not what Landis wants to hear.
We shouldn't have asked that question. Exactly.
Landis wants to move to the next question, I can tell.
but it does tie into the writing, Donna, because you think about it when we talk about revisions, right? I mean, writing that first couple of drafts, to think about how many times you go back, right, before you get right. When you're doing that, Donna, do you write kind of all the way through, or are you revising chapters as you go?
I am exactly like Bill when it comes to writing. First of all, I'm very linear in that I will not deviate. Like I just heard the other day, and I wished I could do this. I wish I could loosen up a little bit, maybe to break out of my way of doing things. But they would write 2 or 3 chapters that are further ahead in the book, because they would get this idea and then they would say, oh, well, let me just go ahead and write that, and then I'll bring the rest of the story up to meet it. I'm amazed by that. I have to write what I have happening right now. This is the scene I'm working on, and I won't leave it alone until, so I'm revising the entire time. I mean, when I say the end, I will usually overwrite. My contracts call for the books to be anywhere between 90,000 to 100,000 words. This Saints of Swallow Hill was, I think, they let me have a little more than that. I think it came in at about 105. But I will write to 125,000 to 130,000 words, just because it makes it easier for me to go in and cut what I need to cut out. And I'm revising all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, all the time throughout the whole process.
I think, I'm kind of between, I do a little punch and roll, I guess. I keep moving, I keep writing, I keep trying, and I don't mind jumping ahead. In one of the books, I had an idea for something near the end. I wrote it, and I came back later, and wrote as I went. But the whole process of writing and revising is critical, I think, to the end product. You mentioned 130,000. I think my novel got up to 125,000 at one time, and I got it back down to 90,000 because I wanted to have an afterword that explained the difference between fact and fiction, which did not make it into the audiobook. Bill and I talked about this. It wasn't necessarily appropriate for the audiobook, but for the print book and the ebook, it's one of those things where, if you ever watched that movie, you've read that historical fiction book, you want to know how much of that is really true and how much is not. So I do that in the afterward part of that. Well, let me ask this of the narrators for real quick. What's your favorite part of the process of doing an audiobook, and what's the most challenging part? Amy, start with you.
Sure. I think for me, part of the most challenging, I'll start with that, is sometimes not knowing if you're doing what the author wants, and then starting and having that in the back of your mind. I guess that's why I value Donna's work so much, is because she really puts it all in there. So it's much easier for me to feel good about it the whole way through instead of second guessing myself. And my favorite part is when you're in a book, you're reading a book, and you forget where you are. My dog barks, I have a heart attack because, I'm so immersed in the book, and then I have to stop again. But no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's it for me, is when you really feel it. I think, oh gosh, it was The Education of Dixie Dupree, and I just started crying in the booth. I mean, it's such a beautiful book, but that for me is my favorite part.
The challenging part?
The challenging for me is not knowing if I'm doing what the author wants. Yeah.
Okay. What about you, Bill? Challenging and favorite parts?
Ooh. Well, the editing part sometimes is a little challenging because I'm a real nitpicker when it comes to myself, and it's a long slog. But it's not only editing, but it's also the quality check for me. And I'll say that's when I am producing the end result, like with you and with some of the other things I've done. Similar to Amy, I've also worked with other producers where I send them the thing, they do the quality check, and then they send me back the corrections and what have you. And there's usually like 2 rounds and what have you. So the most challenging part, yes, it's tedious to go through the editing, but the most challenging part is being very consistent when you've gone out on a limb with certain voices, and maintaining that consistency, especially if that character is early in the book, and then there's a long gap, and then they come back.
I made Bill have to do some elf voices in my Christmas books, and
I can't even imagine.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yes, Landis.
Good. That's really good.
Yeah, and so he had to maintain that throughout. So favorite part, Bill, what do you like that's most enjoyable in doing the audiobook?
Oh, yeah.
Probably the elf voice.
Yeah.
No. Some of the characters, some of the Southern characters, are just so infectious and so fun. The thing later that you've got a couple of excerpts if we have time to get to those. Some of those characters, they're fun to voice. And it's fun to tell the story and to lapse into that character and then pop out, and that is creative. That's fun. That's fun.
I wanted to ask Bill a question real quick, if I could. Sure. And Amy, I don't really write anything amusing or funny most of the time, so I can't ask you this same question. Otherwise, I would. But I found myself chuckling in a few parts with Landis's story. I mean, Landis, you just did such a fabulous job with some of these characters. And I mean, literally, that's how you need to describe them, as they are characters, because I mean, the descriptions, some of the things that they say. So Bill, the question is, how do you prevent yourself from writing? I mean, not writing, but from laughing while you're reading, because that is the thing that would, especially as you're going along, and then it's like you want to laugh, but you can't.
Well, same question. It's like crying for, Amy just mentioned crying at some of your stuff there. So
yeah,
there's that beautiful electronic thing called editing. So, occasionally,
but you have to do it over and over, I would think.
You have to do it again or whatever. It just depends. If I've done the pre-read on it, you're not surprised by it. And so to prepare for it, to set it up, to try to set up the rhythm of it so that the joke plays and all of that stuff. But if you've done the pre-read, and again, on these kind of things on a novel, I do a lot of pre-reading. I don't do as much as Amy. Amy, I bow before you. You are the queen. You are the queen. And I'll also look at the last, say, 3-4 chapters to check those out. But you go with it, and you try to stay within the character and let it play out.
Sometimes it ends up in the narration sometimes, because some of the characters are kind of laughing or smiling. You tell that they're laughing or smiling or crying, and that's infectious too. So let's do this. Let's hear a little bit of the Saints of Swallow Hill. Amy, if you don't mind sharing a little excerpt for us, and maybe tell us, or Donna could tell us where this is, or you could, and then set it up, and so we know who's who before you read it.
You go for it, Donna. You go, girl.
So Amy and I had discussed this, and so this is going to be a very short excerpt, but it is chapter 3. And again, the chapters swap off. You get Dell, and then you get Raylan. And so this is the beginning of chapter 3. It's literally the first paragraph. And I'm not going to give any kind of, because I don't want any spoilers, but I'm not going to give any kind of a backstory. But I feel that this particular chapter carries a lot of punch, because this is actually, I guess you could call it more or less the inciting incident that's going to lead to Dell having to make some really important decisions.
Yeah, and is Dell now on the farm that he was on at the early part of the book?
He is working Mo Sutton's farm in Clinch County, Georgia. And he is at first enjoying himself, and then suddenly he is put into a situation where he is working in a grain bin, which is a very dangerous environment.
Yeah, I think he got there by being a little too frisky with other people's wives, right?
Yeah, Dell was needing to mature a little bit. It's kind of interesting when I've gone on these book events. The readers, a few of the readers will say, I wasn't too sure about Dell at first. Right. And I said, I made him that way on purpose, because we need to see his redemption.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Okay.
He's got a beautiful arc.
That's a good setup. So Amy, anytime you're ready.
Dell didn't know Mo climbed the ladder and stared into the grain bin where nothing but corn could be seen. He couldn't have seen him if he wanted. The kernels covered him completely, pressing his flesh from all directions like he'd been locked down by some strange force. He tried to gulp air, but the rise and fall of his chest was shallow. He choked, strained futilely, exhaled, and finally was unable to draw in any air. His mind sent his body warnings, and his heart shuddered in shock. He was vertically entrapped 4 feet below 15 feet of grain. Mo yelled to the other men, "Can't see nothing. He's gone under. Probably dead." That's it.
Oh, well, yeah, that was a pretty intense scene, as I recall.
Yeah.
He says, get in there and poke that corn to kind of loosen it up a little bit. And the danger is that if you poke it too much, it all starts coming down like a funnel, and you go with it. And that's what happened to Bill. Interesting. So, Bill, which scene are you going to read for us from the?
This is Elkin Travail, Harriet, and Judge Chaw Brady. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
The judge was robeless and seated behind his desk, fiddling with a pouch of Red Man when Elkin Travail and Harriet entered his office. "Take a seat." He reached into the pouch, pulled out a few inches of dark, stringy tobacco with his thumb and forefinger, and tucked a wad in his mouth behind his right cheek. "Have the parties discussed settlement?" Elkin had the first word. "We tried, Your Honor. We made a very reasonable offer." "Where's your trial team, Mr. Elkin?" Elkin sat up straight. "I'm handling the case. My client is here and ready to proceed." Judge Roscoe Chaw Brady used the moment to express his opinion. He leaned below the right side of his desk and spit. The sound of saliva hitting something other than the floor made everyone take notice. Travail knew Judge Brady would not miss an opportunity to assist the parties in settling their case, and though it was highly unregular for a judge to ask about the specifics of the settlement offer in a case he was about to preside over, Chaw Brady did not do regular. "Tell me about the offer." That's enough.
Yeah,
Anyway.
that's good. Yeah, that's right.
Both of you.
Both
I
y'all,
am
y'all both
thoroughly
did great.
impressed.
They did great. Yeah, and we're coming up on our hour here, but I want to get a few tips for anybody that's listening. So if somebody wants to get into this thing called narration, 1 or 2 tips for an aspiring narrator. Amy, your thoughts?
Don't do it. Don't do it. Amy, take it away.
I would say, and this is something I've noticed I have some friends who are narrators who don't listen to audiobooks. I would say listen to as many audiobooks as you can get your hands on, because like we're talking about tone and pacing, each different genre requires a different, tone and pace. And the more that you listen to, the easier it'll be for you to sort of get that into your brain. And also, just go for it. Just set up an ACX. That's how a lot of people start. And just audition for as many as you can get your hands on. And they say, what do they say? You audition for 100, you get called back for 5, 10, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So just don't give up.
Sounds a lot like trying to submit a book for publication.
Your thoughts, Bill?
If you look online, you can Google it. You can find a plethora of information about how to proceed with either voiceover in general or with the, did you lose me? No.
Just for a second.
Okay. You'll find a plethora of information on how to proceed either with audiobooks or in general voiceover work. And generally you can sift through that and learn quite a lot. And because the technology has gotten so accessible, it is possible for someone in Zanzibar to, compete with someone in Los Angeles, California. So you've got a great opportunity out there. You just have to, audition and practice and, find a way. Recently opened up things similar to the ACX form as well. So there's yet another opportunity for people to audition. So
yeah, and I would say from the author standpoint, whether you are an indie author from the start or whether you get your audiobook rights from your small press publisher or something because they don't want to spend the money to do it, or maybe you get the rights back because it was an older book and they didn't do audiobook in the day. Put it up for audition or find a good narrator. If you do put it up for audition, you get a number like I did. I responded to everybody who auditioned through the process and thanked them for their audition and said a few, things about it. And several of them were appreciative. They emailed me back because I wanted people to know that, like you said, there were a lot of people that they knew that if they got one book, they'd get all 3 books, right? So it was that's probably why I got so many auditions, not just my book. But it's nice for, because just like in the writing world, Don, as you know, we get a lot of rejections. And it's not because your book isn't necessarily well written. There could be a lot of reasons that your book's getting rejected. And I think people should know that.
Absolutely. It took 3 years for Dixie Dupree to sell after it went on submission. So, and then it ended up doing really well. And then Amy, got the audio ear award for that novel. So, I mean, just all around it was, it worked out. And, that's the thing. You just have to just keep plugging away.
And I'm not as patient as you, Donna, because I saw that and I said, well, I could wait 3 years, 4 years, or try to get an agent in a year. And I said, but the grass is growing underneath me. I got to keep, I want to keep writing. So, everybody has a different approach, and we're running out of time. I just want to, Donna, we don't have time to go into a lot of writing discussion tonight. I know you've done that before, but maybe we can share a little bit about, a couple of writing suggestions here. You've written a number of books. You do a lot of research in the books. Talk about the blend between research and writing, and how you get that done as we wrap up here.
That's a great question, Aaron. So that is the thing to me that you have to find that balance with, because you don't want to bog the story down. And so I don't know, I cannot, specifically say do this and don't do this. I feel like as a reader, and I have always was first and foremost a reader before I ever became an author. I think if sort of like Amy suggested, that you listen to a lot of audiobooks. And I think if you read enough, and if you've been reading your entire life like I have, you sort of understand what that balance is. I do quite intensive research, but I'm more interested in the story, and using the research to sort of backfill my story is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, and I would add something to that too, because my book has a lot of historical components to it.
This was an unknown history too, Landis. Right, I thought about that. I had this unknown, and you did too.
Right. And so it's interesting when you talk about book tours and stuff, you have something else to talk about other than the plot and the characters. It's a story that people haven't heard. But I would say this, I got so deep into it that I was up to about 120,000 words. As I said, I had way too much history in the book and not enough pace. And so what I had to do is figure out how to cut out, some of the history and pace it better. And that's what came through the revision process. So I would say, to writers out there, don't latch on permanently to all the hard work you did and the research. It's still going to influence what you do, even though it's not directly on the page, right?
Exactly. That's good.
So we lost Bill there. It looks like we got his name up there, not his picture, but maybe he ran out of battery. Oh, there he is. He's back.
There he is.
All right.
I'm back.
Okay. Well, listen, I want to thank everybody for participating. Now, before we step out of here, let's just let everybody know how they can find you if they want to check you out, and maybe look into getting you to do an audiobook, or maybe find out more about writing. So Amy, tell us your website and the best way to check you out.
Sure. My website is amymelissabentley.com. You can send me an email through there, or I also am on ACX and Find a Way. Shoot me an email.
And that's Bentley with a Bentley, right?
Like the car, yes, sir.
Like the car. All right, Bill A. Jones, tell us where people can find you.
Well, I'm on ACX as well as Find a Way, but the website is billajones.com, and you can find all kinds of things about my different hats that I wear, even about me performing. I sing a lot of the Sinatra kind of material, working a lot with big bands, and I just found out as I was sitting here that we just sold out at an event in Cary, North Carolina. I'll be coming your way.
Cary, that's only about an hour from me.
Yeah. I'm going to be doing a thing with a very renowned pianist there. pianist called Lenore Raphael, had a bass player, and they asked me back, and I just found out we're sold out. So anyway, BillAJones.com.
Okay, and Donna?
It's very simple. DonnaEverhart.com, and all my social media links are at the top of the page in the banner.
Yeah, and mine's kind of creative too. It's landiswade.com. You can and you'll even, if you go there, you'll find Bill's picture and clips of the audiobooks that he did for the first 3 books and this book as well. So it'll be great. So y'all hang around just a second. We're gonna say goodbye to the viewers, and thanks everyone who's been with us and watching and learning as we have. And thanks Donna and Bill and Amy for participating tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.